Imagine the air you breathe right now is a lie. Clean, filtered, and invisible. But tonight, we are traveling to a world where the air had a weight, a color, and a story of its own. A place where a night's glory was hidden under layers of sweat and rusted iron, and where the most beautiful cathedrals rose from streets filled with the unthinkable. You aren't just listening to history. You are about to survive it, one breath at a time, as you fall into the deepest sleep you've had in years. Before the first shadow of a castle wall falls over you, notice the silence of your room. Hold on to it. Because where we are going, silence didn't exist. There was always the hum of life, the wet crunch of straw on the heavy boots, the distant, rhythmic boiling of a communal pot, and the thick, pungent aroma of a city that never washed its sins away. We often dream of the Middle Ages as a tapestry of silk and stone, but the reality was organic, raw, and strangely grounding. Tonight, I will take you through the narrow alleys of the 14th century. We will feel the coarse texture of unwashed wool, hear the warning cries from upper windows, and understand why, in a world this grim, the human spirit and its sense became so unforgettable. Let your pillow become the cool stone of a sanctuary. The journey is long, the atmosphere is heavy, and the past is waiting to pull you under. Now, as you settle deeper into your bed, let the boundaries of your modern world begin to dissolve. The hum of your refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing by, the glow of your phone screen, all of it is fading. In its place, a different kind of darkness is rising. It is a darkness that isn't empty, but thick with the presence of thousands of years of human existence. You are standing at the edge of a medieval city gate, just as the sun begins to dip below the horizon. The sky is a bruised purple, and the air is turning cold, carrying with it the dampness of the surrounding forests and the marshes that cling to the city walls. Feel the weight of the clothes on your body change. The light cotton you are wearing is replaced by the heavy, scratchy embrace of coarse wool. It is thick and stiff, smelling of wood smoke and sheep's grease. It doesn't feel clean, not in the way you are used to, but it feels protected. It is a second skin that has seen rain, mud, and the heat of 1,000 fires. Your feet, once bare or in soft socks, are now encased in thin leather shoes that offer little protection from the uneven ground. You can feel every pebble, every dip in the earth, and the unmistakable squelch of mud that never truly dries. Listen, the sounds of this world are rhythmic and slow. There is the rhythmic clop-clop of a lone horse being led to a stable, its hooves striking the soft, muck-covered earth with a dull thud. There is the distant, metallic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, slower now as the day ends, hitting the anvil in a heartbeat-like cadence. And above it all, the great bell of the cathedral begins to toll. It isn't the sharp, electronic beep of an alarm. It is a deep, resonant vibration that you feel in your chest more than you hear in your ears. Each strike of the bell ripples through the heavy air, a signal that the gates are closing, that the world is drawing inward, and that the shadows are reclaiming the streets. As you stand here at the threshold, your nose begins to register the first wave of this ancient world. It is not a single scent, but a complex, layered atmosphere. At first, it is the comforting smell of burning oak and peat from hundreds of hearths. But beneath that, there is something sharper, the acidic tang of animal waste, the sweet cloying scent of rotting hay, and the metallic edge of stagnant water in the gutters. In our world, we flee from these smells, but here they are the very fabric of life. They tell you that people are near, that food is being cooked, that animals are being tended, and that life, in all its messy, vibrant reality, is continuing. You are not a visitor here for just a moment. You are becoming a part of this landscape. The dampness of the evening mist begins to cling to your hair and the wool of your cloak. It feels cool against your forehead, a gentle pressure that encourages your eyes to close. The flickering torches mounted on the stone walls cast long, dancing shadows that stretch across the ground like reaching fingers. These shadows don't feel threatening. They feel like a blanket, wrapping the world in a layer of mystery and rest. As we move forward, leave behind your expectations of hygiene and comfort. They have no place here. Instead, embrace the resilience of the human body and the strange beauty of a world that didn't care for vanity. We are going to walk through the kitchens where the air is thick with grease and herbs, into the great halls where the rush-covered floors hide secrets of a year's worth of spills, and eventually into the quiet, dark chambers where the lords and the peasants alike surrendered to the same heavy, dreamless sleep. The path ahead is narrow and winding. The timber-framed houses lean over us, blocking out the stars, creating a tunnel of history that only we can navigate. Your breath is steady now, matching the slow pulse of the city. The modern world is a ghost, and the medieval world is the only truth. Follow the sound of my voice as it drifts through the wood smoke and the mist. We are going deeper now, past the gate, into the heart of the hallowed grime. You are safe. You are tired. And the story of the past is the most beautiful lullaby ever written. We are entering the world of the unwashed, the raw, and the eternal. Let the journey begin. As you pass through the heavy oak gates of the city, the air changes. It is no longer the open, sweeping wind of the countryside, but something dense, trapped between the leaning timber walls of 1,000 homes. Welcome to the sensory reality of the 14th century. To a modern mind, this is a landscape of filth, but to the medieval soul, this was the scent of civilization. You are walking into a thick, invisible tapestry woven from every aspect of human survival. The first layer you encounter is the omnipresent wood smoke. It hangs like a low mist over the rooftops, a constant, charcoal-scented blanket that seeped into every curtain, every cloak, and every pore of skin. It is the smell of the hearth, the only source of warmth and light, burning oak, peat, and dried animal dung. This smoke is your constant companion, a dry, stinging haze that blurred the edges of the world and offered a strange, hazy comfort against the damp cold of the stone streets. But as you move deeper into the narrow arteries of the town, the symphony of scents becomes more complex, more visceral. Beneath the smoke, there is the raw, sweet smell of the market. Imagine walking past a butcher's stall, where the blood of a freshly slaughtered ox has pooled in the rhythmic grooves of the earth. The metallic copper tang of the blood mingles with the scent of grey, fatty suet and the gamey musk of hanging carcasses. There is no refrigeration here. There is only the salt, the wind, and the desperate hope that the meat sells before the sun reaches its zenith. This is followed closely by the pungent, earthy aroma of the tanneries. If you follow the wind, you will find the edge of the river where leather is being worked. The scent here is sharp and acidic, a mix of oak bark, lime, and the overwhelming ammonia of stale urine used to soften the hides. It is a smell so potent, it seems to vibrate in the air, marking the boundary between the respectable world and the industrial grit of the poor. Now, let your feet lead you toward the communal heart of the neighborhood. Here, the scent of survival turns toward the kitchen. From the small dark windows of the hovels, the steam of a perpetual pottage drifts out. It is a thick, vegetal smell: onions, leeks, and dried peas simmering for days in a single iron pot, enriched by the occasional scrap of salt pork. It is a heavy, humid scent that speaks of endurance. This is the background noise of the medieval nose, a constant reminder of the thin line between hunger and hay. And yet, even this is overtaken by the most intimate scent of all: the human animal. In this world, the body is a vessel that is rarely, if ever, fully submerged in water. Imagine the smell of a crowd in the heat of a midsummer noon. It is the scent of aged sweat, trapped in heavy linen, of hair that has only known the brush and the comb, and of skin that has been seasoned by the dust of the road and the soot of the fire. It is a deep, yeasty, organic musk. To us, it is a warning. To them, it was the comforting evidence of a neighbor's presence. As the evening settles, the ground beneath your feet begins to release its own secrets. The streets are a layer cake of history. Beneath the fresh straw scattered by a hopeful shopkeeper lies the compressed muck of a decade. Rainwater mixes with horse manure, rotting cabbage stalks, and the overflow of the gutters to create a dark, fermented slush. This is the mire, a living, breathing entity that coated the hem of every gown and the sole of every boot. Every time a cartwheel passes, it churns up the scent of the deep earth, a damp, fungal odor that smells of decay and rebirth all at once. It is the smell of the world breaking down and being trodden back into the dust. But do not let this overwhelm you. Within this chaos of odors, there are notes of incredible sweetness, used like a shield against sod, the grime. As you pass a wealthy merchant's house, or a small stone chapel, the air suddenly clears. You catch a fleeting ghost of lavender, of dried rosemary, and the spicy, resinous bite of frankincense drifting from a thurible. These are the scents of the soul, intended to lift the spirit above the mud of the material world. People carried small bundles of dried herbs posies pressed against their noses as they walked through the worst of the slums, creating a tiny, private sanctuary of perfume amidst the oceanic stink. Sounds right. This contrast is the essence of the medieval experience, the highest aspirations of heaven rising directly out of the deepest filth of the earth. You are walking through this Bi-An, Jiao Hanen, this symphony, and your senses are beginning to adapt. The initial shock is fading, replaced by a strange, hypnotic rhythm. You realize that in this world, nothing is hidden. Life is loud, life is smelly, and life is vibrantly, undeniably present. The odors tell you who is baking bread, who is brewing ale, who is sick, and who is wealthy. It is a map drawn in the air, a language that everyone understood, but no one needed to speak. As you continue to drift through the darkening streets, let the complexity of these scents weigh down your eyelids. The world is too full, too textured to be ignored, and the sheer density of this atmosphere acts as a heavy curtain, closing off the distractions of your own time. You are becoming part of the mire, part of the smoke, and part of the ancient, unwashed story of humanity. The air is thick, the bed is soft, and the scents of the past are lulling you into a deep, heavy, and timeless sleep. To understand the medieval world, you must first understand the invisible war they were fighting every single day. This was a war not of swords or shields, but of the air itself. In the modern world, we fear germs and bacteria, microscopic entities we can identify under a lens. But for the person living in the year 1350, the enemy was much more atmospheric. They believed in the theory of miasma. This was the conviction that diseases like the plague, cholera, and even common fevers were caused by bad air, a heavy poisonous mist that rose from rotting organic matter, stagnant water, and the breath of the sick. This belief created a unique psychological landscape. When you walked through a stinking alleyway, you weren't just smelling something unpleasant. You were smelling death itself. This fear dictated how they built their homes, how they treated their bodies, and why they were so terrified of the very thing we consider the ultimate cleanser, water. Imagine the logic of a medieval physician. They observed that the sick often smelled foul, and that places where filth accumulated were the epicenters of outbreaks. Their conclusion was simple. The smell was the cause. Therefore, the goal of hygiene was not to be clean in a biological sense, but to be protected from the air. This led to a profound suspicion of bathing. It was widely believed that hot water opened the pores of the skin, those tiny, invisible doors that cover your body. If your pores were open, the miasma could slide right in, infecting your blood and rotting you from the inside out. To them, a layer of dirt, grease, and sweat was not a sign of neglect. It was a suit of armor. It was a physical barrier that sealed the pores and kept the poisonous atmosphere at bay. This is why a person could go months, or even years, without ever submerging their body in a tub. They weren't being lazy, they were trying to survive. As you lie there in your bed, try to feel the weight of this belief. In your world, a hot shower is a sanctuary, a way to wash away the stress of the day. But in the medieval mind, that shower would feel like a dangerous exposure, an invitation to the shadows. Instead of washing, they focused on dry cleaning. They believed that if they changed their linen undergarments frequently, the linen would draw the impurities and sweat away from the skin. A wealthy man might change his shirt every day, believing that as long as the white fabric against his skin remained bright, his body remained pure. The dirt on his outer wool tunic didn't matter. The soot on his hands was irrelevant. What mattered was the internal balance of the humors and the integrity of the skin's surface against the invisible, floating poisons of the world. This created a society that was intellectually safe in its own filth. There was a comfort in the crust. When a mother looked at her child covered in the dust of the hearth and the grime of the street, she didn't see a need for a bath. She saw a child whose body was closed to the plague. They lived in a state of sensory acceptance. The omnipresent stench of the city was a constant reminder of the danger, but it also spurred an incredible ingenuity in fragrance. Since bad air caused disease, they believed that good air, sweet, spicy, or sharp scents, could act as a medicinal shield. This is why people carried pomanders filled with ambergris, cloves, and cinnamon. They weren't just trying to mask the smell of the gutter. They were trying to create a personal bubble of healthy atmosphere. They were breathing in the scent of expensive spices as a form of spiritual and physical vaccination. Think about the quiet confidence this gave them. Even in the middle of a crowded, foul-smelling market, a person could feel safe as long as they held a sprig of dried rosemary to their nose. The scent was their medicine. The foulness was the enemy. This logic was consistent from the lowest peasant to the highest king. It was a shared reality that made the world make sense. As the darkness of the medieval night deepens around you, let this different way of thinking settle into your mind. You don't need to fear the grime of the past, for in their eyes, it was a protective cloak. The world was heavy, the air was thick, but there was a system to it all. The miasma moved in the shadows, but the herbs and the thick, unwashed wool kept the people safe. Let your own breath become slow and rhythmic, like a pulse. You are protected by the distance of centuries, drifting through a history where the air was a living thing, and where the simple act of breathing was a constant, quiet battle for survival. The world of miasma is fading now, leaving only the soft, heavy silence of a night that understands its own secrets. As you move deeper into the labyrinth of the city, the narrow streets begin to feel like a living, breathing organism. The timber-framed houses lean toward each other, their upper stories jutting out so far that they almost touch, creating a dark, claustrophobic tunnel that shields the ground from any hope of sunlight. This is where the abstract fear of miasma becomes a physical, inescapable reality. Under your feet, the cobblestones have disappeared beneath a thick, dark slurry known as the mire. It is a fermented mixture of rotting straw, animal dung, and the household waste of hundreds of families. Every step you take is heavy, the mud clinging to your thin leather soles with a rhythmic, sucking sound. In this world, the street is not just a path. It is the city's primary disposal system. The architecture itself is designed for a life of convenience that ignores the senses. Look up, and you will see the overhanging jetties of the houses. These were built to maximize living space, but they served another, more visceral purpose. In an age without underground pipes or complex plumbing, the law of gravity was the only sanitation officer. At any moment, the quiet hum of the street might be shattered by the creak of a wooden shutter opening high above. This is the signal to freeze. A muffled voice calls out the dreaded warning, Garde à l'eau, a corruption of the French Gare de l'eau, meaning, watch out for the water. Before the echoes of the shout have even faded, a cascade of liquid waste and the contents of a ceramic chamber pot are launched from the window, plummeting through the air to join the filth of the gutter below. If you are lucky, the waste splashes harmlessly into the center of the street, adding to the stagnant, black stream that flows toward the nearest river. If you are unlucky, the fine mist of the impact clings to your wool cloak, a new layer of the city's history added to your clothing. This was not considered a crime or even a scandal. It was simply the rhythm of the morning. Everyone, from the wealthiest merchant to the lowliest apprentice, lived under the constant threat of the sky falling in the form of human waste. The streets were never dry, and they were never truly clean. The air here is so thick with the smell of ammonia and decay that it feels like a physical weight against your skin. Imagine the sound of this environment as you drift further into the shadows. It is the sound of wooden cartwheels grinding the filth into the earth, the splashing of stray dogs wading through the gutters, and the constant dull roar of a population living in incredibly close quarters. There is no escape from the proximity of others. You can hear your neighbors coughing through the thin wattle and daub walls. You can smell what they are cooking, and more intimately, you can smell the waste they have just discarded. This lack of privacy extended even to the most basic human functions. Public latrines, where they existed, were often just wooden planks suspended over a running stream or a deep, stone-lined pit known as a cesspool. Men and women would sit together, shoulder to shoulder, conversing about the price of grain or the latest news from the war, while the waste of the city collected beneath them. The cesspools were the dark heart of the medieval home. Often located in the cellar or just outside the back door, these pits were meant to contain the household's waste for years at a time, but they were rarely perfectly sealed. The liquids would seep into the surrounding soil, often contaminating the very wells that people used for drinking water. They didn't understand the link between the seepage and the sickness that followed. They only knew that the air near the wells was heavy and sweet with the scent of rot. To walk these streets is to navigate a minefield of organic decay. As you lie still, let the image of these dark, damp alleys settle in your mind. The city is a place of constant motion and constant disposal. The Gare de l'eau cry is the lullaby of the urban night, a reminder that life is being processed, discarded, and trodden into the mud. Feel the coolness of the night mist as it begins to settle over the mire, dampening the smells and softening the harsh edges of the timber houses. The world of the street is a heavy, crowded place, but you are merely a ghost passing through it. You are safe in your silence, shielded by time from the splash of the chamber pot and the stench of the gutter. The rhythmic splashing of the city's waste is moving further away, turning into a distant, watery hum that pulls you down, deeper into the dark, quiet earth of sleep. Water dart. In our modern world, it is the very definition of purity, a transparent gift that washes away the fatigue of the day and refreshes the soul. But as you drift deeper into the medieval consciousness, you must let go of this comfort. To the person living in the 14th century, water was a dual-faced deity necessary for life, yet deeply, fundamentally terrifying. The Grand Noble Thermae of the Roman Empire, with their heated floors and sprawling pools, where hundreds gathered to soak in steam and conversation, had long since crumbled into moss-covered ruins. In their place, a new and chilling philosophy had taken root. Water was no longer seen as a cleanser. It was viewed as a silent invader, a liquid key that could unlock the very defenses of the human body. Imagine the absolute stillness of a medieval evening. You are sitting near a small, flickering hearth, and the thought of submerging your body in a tub of warm water crosses your mind. In this era, such an act was not a luxury, it was a gamble with death. The prevailing medical wisdom, whispered by physicians and believed by kings, warned that hot water softened the flesh and dilated the pores, those tiny invisible mouths covering your skin. Once these pores were forced open by the warmth, they became defenseless portals. Through them, the miasma, the invisible pestilential fog of disease we spoke of earlier, could pour into your internal organs. To bathe was to strip away your natural armor. It was to leave your blood and your humors exposed to the predatory air of a world filled with plague. This fear created a strange and lingering paradox. While the medieval person loved the feeling of being refreshed, they avoided the total immersion of the body with a devotion that bordered on the religious. Cleanliness was moved from the surface of the skin to the surface of the clothes. If you were a person of status, you didn't seek to be wet, you sought to be white. The linen shift worn against the skin was the true indicator of hygiene. It was believed that linen possessed a mystical, porous quality that could wick away the impurities of the body, absorbing sweat and oils like a sponge. As long as your linen was bleached and crisp, the skin beneath it was considered spiritually and physically managed. The dirt on the body was merely a seal, a protective crust that kept the world out and the life force in. Consider the sensory experience of this dry hygiene. Instead of the splash of a shower, there was the rhythmic scraping of a dry cloth. A person might spend an hour washing by simply rubbing their skin with a piece of rough fabric until it glowed red, believing they were scouring away the toxins without the danger of opening their pores. They would wash their hands and face the parts of the body exposed to God and the public, but the torso, the limbs, and the private depths of the body remained in a state of permanent, dusty drought. This was a world where the skin was seasoned like old leather, toughened by layers of salt and the constant friction of wool. And yet, the memory of water lingered in the shadows of the monasteries and the castle walls. Water was used for baptism, for the washing of feet in imitation of Christ, and for the ritual cleansing of hands before a great feast. But these were symbolic gestures, brief touches of moisture that were quickly dried away. The deep, soaking, bone-warming bath was a rare event, often reserved for the eve of a wedding or a night's dubbing, and even then, it was accompanied by a sense of profound vulnerability. As you lie there, feeling the cool, clean sheets of your own bed, try to imagine the sensation of a skin that has not felt the rush of water in a year. It feels heavy, perhaps a bit stiff, but to the medieval mind, it feels safe. They looked at the glistening, wet skin of a swimmer with horror, seeing only a body that had surrendered its boundaries to the invisible demons of the mist. The silence of the night is your sanctuary, and the dry, warm air of your room is your shield. You are drifting into a history where the greatest danger was a drop of water, and the greatest comfort was the thick, protective layer of the unwashed cell. Let the fear of the open pore fade away. You are enclosed, you are sealed, and you are drifting down into a world where the drought of the body is the peace of the soul. The water is still, the air is heavy, and the shadows are wrapping you in a cloak that no liquid can ever penetrate. If the fear of open pores was the invisible barrier that kept the medieval soul away from the river, the rare ritual of the wooden tub was the exception that proved the rule. Imagine a small dim room in a modest timber-framed house. The only light comes from the dying embers of the hearth, casting long, flickering shadows of amber and soot against the wattle and daub walls. In the center of this room sits a large circular wooden vat, its staves held together by rusted iron hoops. This is the family bathtub, a vessel that is seen as both a medicinal necessity and a profound physical ordeal. To fill this tub is a labor of hours, a slow and rhythmic process that begins long before the sun has even set. Picture the youngest servant, or the oldest daughter of the house, walking back and forth from the communal well. The wooden buckets are heavy, the cold water splashing against their shins with every step, soaking into the hem of their coarse wool garments. They carry this water to the hearth, where it is poured into a massive iron cauldron suspended over the flames. You can hear the hiss of the first few drops hitting the hot metal, the sound of steam rising in a white ghostly cloud that fills the kitchen with the scent of damp stone and wood smoke. It takes dozens of these trips, dozens of these boils, to fill the tub even halfway. By the time the water is ready, it is not the clear, sparkling liquid of a modern spa. It is a yellowish, hard water, infused with the minerals of the earth and the faint gray ash from the fire. The ritual of the bath follows a strict, unyielding hierarchy. It is a communal experience, yet one defined by rank. The master of the house goes first. He steps into the steaming water, the heat shocking his skin, which has been encased in layers of linen and wool for months. As he sinks down, the water begins to change. It strips away the top layer of soot, the salt of sweat, and the oils of the skin. He scrubs himself not with fragrant soaps, but perhaps with a ball of dried soapwort or a rough piece of pumice stone. The water, once clear, begins to cloud. It turns a murky, opaque brown, thick with the residue of a man who has lived a life of labor and travel. He remains there only long enough to soften the grime, for the fear of the open pore still lingers in the back of his mind. He must finish before the water cools, before the miasma can find its way in. Next comes the mistress of the house. She enters the same water. There is no draining of the tub, no fresh supply from the well. To waste that much firewood and labor would be unthinkable. She steps into the lukewarm, silty remains of her husband's bath. The water is heavier now, more viscous. She adds a few drops of lavender oil or a handful of dried rose petals, a desperate attempt to reclaim a sense of purity from the darkening liquid. The petals float on the surface like tiny, bruised boats in a sea of grey silk. She washes her hair, a rare and exhausting task, using a mixture of wood ash and egg whites that leaves a faint, sulphurous scent in the air. Then come the children, from the eldest to the youngest. By the time the smallest child is lifted into the vat, the water is cold, dark and thick. It is a soup of the family's collective existence. The phrase "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" originates here, in this very moment where the water is so opaque and filthy that a small child could almost be lost in the gloom of the wooden depths. The child shivers as the cold, greasy liquid touches their skin. There is no joy in this bath, only a shivering haste to be finished, to be rubbed dry with a rough linen towel, and to be wrapped back in the safety of warm, dry wool. As you lie in your own bed, feel the incredible luxury of your solitude. You are not sharing your warmth. You are not washing in the remnants of another's day. Imagine the sensation of that medieval family, all sitting by the fire after their communal scrub, their skin tingling from the rare contact with water, smelling faintly of wood ash and old herbs. They feel a strange lightness, a temporary shedding of their physical burden, even as they hurry to dress themselves, to close those dangerous pores against the night air. The room is quiet now, the only sound the slow drip-drip of the water leaking from the wooden staves onto the dirt floor. The steam has vanished, leaving only a damp chill. The fire is nothing but glowing red eyes in the darkness. The house is settling, the timber groaning as it cools. You can almost feel the humidity of that room, the heavy, moist air that clings to the lungs. But you are drifting away from that crowded hearth. You are moving into the silence of the night, where the water is still, and the family is huddled together for warmth under a mountain of heavy blankets. The wooden tub stands empty and dark, a silent witness to the labor of cleanliness. Your breath is slow, deep, and clear. You are sinking into a sleep that is clean, quiet, and entirely your own. The murky waters of the past are receding, leaving you on a shore of perfect, tranquil darkness. There is no more scrubbing, no more labor, only the weightless drift into the deep. Beyond the private struggle of the wooden vat in a cramped kitchen, there existed a far more complex and controversial space in the medieval urban landscape, the public bathhouse, known as the stew. To walk toward one of these establishments in a bustling city like London or Paris was to move toward a sensory crossroads where the desperate desire for warmth met the dark undercurrents of social scandal. As you imagine yourself drifting toward the river's edge, where these bathhouses were often clustered for easy access to water, the atmosphere shifts. The air becomes heavy and humid, thick with a damp, pale mist that clings to the timber beams and stone foundations. It is a world of ghosts, where the sharp, biting cold of the medieval street is replaced by a cloying tropical heat that feels both welcoming and unnerving. The public bathhouses were the last crumbling echoes of the Roman Empire's grandeur, yet they had been transformed into something entirely medieval. Inside, the architecture was often simple large stone rooms with low, vaulted ceilings that trapped the steam. Long wooden benches lined the walls, and at the center were the great tubs. Unlike the lonely, murky water of the family home, these were places of social collision. People from all walks of life, merchants, travelers, friars, and laborers, would gather here to soak their weary bones. You can hear the low, rhythmic murmur of voices echoing off the whetstone, a constant hum of gossip and commerce that never seemed to cease. It was here, in the semi-darkness of the steam, that secrets were traded and deals were struck, all while the participants sat shoulder to shoulder in the tepid, swirling water. But to enter a stew was to step into a place of profound moral ambiguity. The church looked upon these bathhouses with a mixture of suspicion and outright hostility. They saw the mixing of bodies and the indulgence in physical comfort as a gateway to sin, and in many cases, they were right. Over time, the line between a place of hygiene and a place of vice began to blur. The word stew eventually became synonymous with a brothel, as the privacy of the steam provided a convenient veil for more illicit activities. Imagine the psychological tension of a medieval citizen entering such a place. They were seeking relief from the bone-chilling damp of winter. Yet they were also risking their reputation and, in their mind, their eternal soul. The warmth of the water was a luxury that felt dangerously close to the fires of the afterlife. As you linger in this imagined space, notice the peculiar details of the environment. The walls are slick with condensation, tiny rivulets of water carving paths through the soot and grime that had accumulated on the stones. The scent is an overwhelming mixture of wet wood, stale sweat, and the faint, sweet aroma of herbs like mint or hyssop thrown into the water to mask the smell of the unwashed masses. There is a specific sound to the bathhouse, the rhythmic splashing of water against wood, the heavy thud of wet towels being dropped onto the floor, and the distant, muffled roar of the fires beneath the floorboards, where servants labored in the sweltering heat to keep the great cauldrons boiling. This was a world of intense physical proximity. There were no private stalls or curtains. To bathe was to be seen, to have your scars, your deformities, and your history exposed to the gaze of strangers. It was a place where the rigid hierarchy of the Middle Ages briefly dissolved in the fog. A wealthy wool merchant might find himself sharing a tub with a common carter, their social status momentarily washed away by the same grey, lukewarm water. Yet, even in this shared space, the fear of the miasma remained. They stayed in the water just long enough to feel the heat penetrate their muscles, but never so long that they felt their spirit begin to soften. By the late 14th century, as the Black Death began its devastating march across the continent, these bathhouses started to fall into silence. The fear of the bad air trapped in the humid rooms became too great to ignore. People began to believe that the steam itself was a carrier of the plague, a moist veil that pulled the sickness directly into the lungs. One by one, the stews were boarded up, their great stone cauldrons left to rust, and their wooden tubs to rot. The communal warmth that had defined urban life for centuries was replaced by a cold, isolated suspicion. Now, as the steam of this ancient bathhouse fades from your mind, feel the dry, still air of your own room once again. You are not surrounded by the murmurs of a crowded stew or the judgment of a medieval priest. The dampness of the stone is gone, replaced by the soft, comforting weight of your blankets. The history of the bathhouse is a story of human connection and the fear of the flesh, a rhythmic cycle of seeking warmth and retreating into the shadows. Let the sound of the splashing water become a distant, fading echo. You are drifting away from the heat and the scandal into a cool, silent darkness where no one can see you and no one can judge. The world of the stews is closed, the fires are out, and you are finally perfectly alone in the deep, quiet waters of sleep. Close your eyes and bring your focus to a place you rarely think about until it causes you pain. The inside of your mouth. In our world, the morning ritual begins with the minty sting of toothpaste and the rhythmic scrub of plastic bristles. But as you drift back to a timber-framed house in the year 1380, that freshness is a fantasy. Imagine waking up in the pale gray light of dawn. Your tongue feels heavy, coated in a thick, dry film of the previous night's pottage and the stale yeast of dark ale. There is no sink, no running water, and certainly no mint. This is the reality of the medieval smiler landscape of ivory, decay, and the constant, dull throb of survival. For the medieval citizen, dental hygiene was a curious mixture of vanity and total neglect. If you were a person of some means, your morning might involve a small piece of rough linen cloth. Imagine the sensation of that fabric, perhaps slightly dampened with a mixture of vinegar and honey, being rubbed vigorously against your gums. It is a coarse, scratchy feeling, the grit of the linen scraping against the enamel of your teeth. Some use the charred remains of rosemary twigs or the white ash from the hearth, believing that the remnants of the fire could burn away the impurities of the mouth. The taste is bitter, smoky, and sharp, a stark contrast to the soft silence of the waking world. But even with these efforts, the shadow of decay was inevitable. Without the understanding of sugar's slow fermenting sabotage or the invisible armies of bacteria, teeth were often left to the mercy of time. Imagine the slow, creeping sensation of a cavity not as a medical diagnosis, but as a toothworm, a literal parasite that people believed bored holes into the bone. The pain was not a sharp sting, but a heavy, rhythmic pulsing that vibrated through the jaw and into the temple, matching the slow tolling of the cathedral bells. To distract from this throb, they would chew on dry cloves or peppercorns, the spice creating a numbing, burning heat that occupied the nerves, while the breath turned spicy and dark. When the pain became unbearable, the solution was not a surgeon in a sterile theater, but a visit to the local barber. Picture the barber's shop, a place of blood, hair, and shadows. There is a heavy wooden chair, worn smooth by the grip of 1,000 terrified hands. The barber does not use anesthesia. He uses his strength and a pair of cold, heavy iron forceps. Feel the phantom chill of that metal as it enters the mouth. It smells of rust and the copper tang of the previous patient's blood. The jaw is held firm, the iron grips the tooth, and for a few agonizing seconds, the world narrows down to a single violent crunch of bone and root. Then, the silence returns, followed by the metallic taste of salt and a mouthful of strong wine to wash away the trauma. For those who could not afford the barber, or for the elderly whose teeth had long since surrendered, the mouth became a place of softened textures. They ate bread soaked in broth and meats boiled until they fell apart, their gums toughening like old leather. Yet, despite the blackened stumps and the gaps in their grins, they continued to talk, to sing, and to kiss. There was a profound acceptance of this decay. A black smile was not a sign of moral failing, but a mark of age and the simple passage of a life lived. As you lie in your own bed, feel the smooth, clean surface of your teeth with your tongue. Appreciate the absence of that dull, medieval throb. The spice of the cloves is fading now, replaced by the cool, neutral air of your room. The barber's chair is empty, the iron forceps are put away, and the toothworm has been chased back into the shadows of history. Your jaw is relaxed, your breath is steady, and light. You are drifting away from the pain and the grit of the past into a space where the mouth is silent and the mind is at peace. The rhythmic pulsing of the jaw has turned into a slow, heavy heartbeat, pulling you down into the quiet, dark velvet of a sleep that knows no decay. The smile of the past is a fading memory, and the comfort of the present is your only reality. Breathe in the stillness. Breathe out the history. You are falling, softly and deeply, into the void. Imagine yourself standing in the heart of a winter's night, centuries ago, encased in a suit of cold, unforgiving steel. This is the world of the night, a realm where the romantic image of shining armor meets the brutal, gritty reality of the human body trapped within a metal shell. To the outside observer, you are a monument of strength, a glimmering silhouette against the gray sky. But inside, you are a landscape of heat, friction, and the slow, rhythmic accumulation of salt and dampness. The armor is not just a defense, it is a private greenhouse for the sense and struggles of the flesh. As you lie still in your bed, try to feel the phantom weight of the gambeson, the thick, quilted tunic worn beneath the plate. It is made of layers of heavy linen or wool, stuffed with horsehair or scrap fabric to cushion the blow of a mace. It is never truly dry. From the moment you pull it over your head, it begins to absorb the life of your body. It drinks your sweat, becoming a heavy, sodden sponge that clings to your skin with a damp, itchy persistence. The smell of this garment is a history of every battle you have fought and every mile you have ridden. It is a deep, fermented musk of aged perspiration, leather grease, and the faint metallic tang of the rusted buckles that hold your world together. Now, imagine the cooling sensation of the steel plates being strapped over this damp padding. The metal is cold against your limbs, a sudden shocking contrast to the heat of your skin. But as you move, as you ride through the mud and the rain, the temperature inside the armor begins to rise. There is no ventilation here. The air is trapped, cycling between the steel and the wool, growing thicker and more humid with every breath. If a speck of grit or a splash of muddy water finds its way through the joints of the elbows or the knees, it becomes a permanent resident. It grinds against your skin, creating small, raw abrasions that never have the chance to heal in the damp darkness. This is the night's rust, not the oxidation of the metal, but the slow, stinging erosion of the skin itself. The maintenance of such a suit was a labor of constant, rhythmic grinding. To clean the armor was not to wash it with water, which would only invite the orange rot of rust, but to scour it with sand and vinegar. Picture a young squire kneeling in the dirt, his hands rhythmic and tireless, as he rubs a handful of abrasive sand against a breastplate. The sound is a harsh, biting hiss, a white noise of friction that echoes through the courtyard. The sand strips away the tarnish, but the smell remains a sharp, acidic cloud of vinegar, mixing with the oily stench of the tallow used to coat the leather straps. When the sun sets and the armor is finally removed, the sensation is one of profound, heavy relief, yet the body remains marked. Your skin is patterned with the indentations of the quilted padding, a map of the pressure you have endured. You smell of the forge, the stable, and the deep organic heat of an animal that has been caged in tin. There is no bath waiting for you in the camp. Instead, you might rub your limbs with a dry cloth, or perhaps a splash of strong wine to sting the raw spots into a forced cleanliness. The scent of the wine mingles with the salt of your skin, creating a sharp, medicinal aroma that lingers in the air of your tent. As you breathe in the cool, filtered air of your own room, feel the incredible lightness of your body. You are not encased in steel, You are wrapped in soft, breathable fabric that does not trap your heat or grind against your skin. The heavy, rhythmic clanking of the night's journey is fading into the distance, replaced by the soft, steady pulse of your own heart. The rust is gone, the vinegar has evaporated, and the damp wool has been traded for the dry, cool sanctuary of your sheets. You are drifting away from the weight of the armor, into a space where your body is free, light, and perfectly at rest. The night has dismounted, the steel is laid aside, and the only battle left is the gentle surrender to the deep, dark quiet of the night. You are safe. You are weightless. You are falling into the silence. In the medieval world, the skin was not a surface to be washed, but a frontier to be managed. To understand this, you must shift your focus away from the basin of water and toward the heavy wooden chest at the foot of the bed. Inside, folded with meticulous care, lies the true secret of medieval hygiene: linen. While the outer world was a landscape of mud and coarse wool, the inner world, a layer that actually touched the human soul, was defined by the cool, crisp, and slightly abrasive embrace of white flax. As you lie there, imagine the sensation of a long linen shift or shirt against your body. It is not soft like modern cotton. It has a structural integrity, a rhythmic texture that feels almost like a gentle, constant massage against your skin. To the people of the 14th century, this garment was a miraculous engine of cleanliness. They believed that linen possessed an inherent power to draw out the impurities of the flesh. In their mind, the body was constantly seeping, exhaling humus and sweat that needed to be captured and carried away. They did not need to submerge themselves in a tub, because the linen did the work for them. It was a dry bath, a continuous process of wicking away the oils and the grime. A wealthy man might own a dozen such shirts, and the act of changing them was his most sacred hygienic ritual. Imagine the sound of a fresh linen shirt being shaken out in the morning, a sharp, snapping crack that echoes through the quiet stone chamber. The smell is faint, but distinct. The scent of sun-dried grass and the ghost of the lye used to bleach it. As the day progresses, the linen begins to change. It absorbs the heat of your body, softening as it drinks in your perspiration. It becomes a second skin, a protective barrier that stands between your vulnerable pores and the scratchy, oily wool of your outer tunic. This was the genius of medieval layering. The wool provided the warmth and the armor against the elements, while the linen provided the sanctuary. Even the poorest peasant would strive to own at least one linen shift. It was their most prized possession, washed in the river with rhythmic, pounding stones and dried on the hawthorn bushes until it was white as a cloud. To wear clean linen was to feel spiritually aligned. It was the physical manifestation of a pure heart, even if the feet were caked in the dust of the road. There was a profound intimacy in this relationship with fabric. Because the body was rarely washed with water, the linen became the keeper of a person's history. It held the scent of their hearth, the salt of their labor, and the faint herbal traces of the lavender or wormwood tucked into the storage chests to ward off moths. When a person felt unclean, they didn't seek a shower. They sought a change of clothes. The feeling of pulling off a damp, heavy shirt and replacing it with a dry, stiff one was the ultimate medieval luxury. It was a reset for the senses, a moment of profound physical relief that allowed the spirit to feel refreshed and ready to face the heavy atmosphere of the world once more. Now, as you settle further into your own modern sheets, feel the lineage of that comfort. Your bed is a direct descendant of that medieval desire for a clean, dry layer against the skin. You are surrounded by fabrics that breathe, that protect you, and that require no labor from you to remain pure. The scratchy wool of the past is gone, and the heavy linen has been refined into the soft, weightless textures of today. The rhythmic scraping of the dry cloth against the skin has faded into a memory. Your body is at ease, free from the burden of absorbing the world's grime. You are drifting into a space where the clothes are light, The air is still, and the layers of history are falling away one by one. The linen is soft, the bed is deep, and you are falling into a sleep that is as white and quiet as a fresh bleached cloth drying in the summer sun. Breathe in the lightness. Breathe out the weight. You are perfectly, beautifully clean in the dark. The apothecary's shop is a sanctuary of shadows and glass, a place where the air itself feels like a thick, medicinal syrup. As you step across the threshold, leaving the heavy, organic stench of the muddy street behind, your senses are met with a sudden, sharp clarity. This is the front line of the medieval war against miasma. The floor is covered in a thick carpet of dried rushes, mixed with handfuls of bitter wormwood and meadowsweet, which release a dry herbal crunch under your feet with every slow step you take. The light is dim, filtered through small, thick panes of green-tinted glass, and the walls are lined with hundreds of small ceramic jars and dark wooden drawers, each holding a secret intended to keep the corruption of the world at bay. Imagine the scent of this place. It is a dense, vibrating cloud of resins and spices. The most dominant note is the cold, medicinal bite of pine resin and camphor, intended to clear the lungs and sharpen the spirit. Beneath that, there is the deep, earthy warmth of dried valerian root and the spicy, nose-tingling heat of cloves and black pepper. These were not just seasonings. They were the ammunition of the soul. The apothecary believed that by filling a room with these powerful, pure odors, he could physically displace the heavy, invisible poisons of the street. To breathe in this shop was to feel a momentary stinging safety, a barrier of fragrance that sat at the back of your throat, like a shield. Observe the apothecary as he works in the silence. His movements are rhythmic and deliberate. He takes a heavy stone pestle and begins to grind a handful of dried frankincense tears in a deep marble mortar. The sound is a low, gritty rasp, a white noise of friction that fills the quiet room. With every rotation of the pestle, a fine, pale dust rises into the air, carrying a scent that is both ancient and holy. He adds a few drops of rosewater and a pinch of crushed charcoal, creating a thick, dark paste that will be rolled into small pellets. These are the comfort bowls that wealthy citizens would carry in silver pomanders, clutched to their noses as they navigated the filth of the market. A tiny, portable fortress of scent. But there's a darker side to this fragrant refuge. Tucked away in the lower shelves are the heavy, muskier ingredients, jars of rendered bear grease, dried toads, and the mysterious, leathery fragments of what is claimed to be mummy powder. These were the heavy hitters of medieval medicine, used to balance the humors when the air had already done its damage. The smell here is different. It is animalistic, primal, and slightly sweet with the scent of long-preserved decay. It is a reminder that even in this sanctuary, the reality of the organic world cannot be entirely escaped. The apothecary's hands are stained a permanent, deep yellow from turmeric and sulfur, and his skin carries the lingering metallic tang of the mercury he uses to treat the most stubborn of ailments. As you linger in the stillness of the shop, the rhythmic grinding of the pestle begins to slow. The shadows in the corners grow longer, and the many scents begin to blur into a single, heavy, and hypnotic atmosphere. You can feel the weight of the jars on the shelves, the centuries of accumulated knowledge and desperation they represent. The air is so full, so rich with the essence of roots, barks, and resins, that it feels like a warm blanket pressing against your tired eyes. You are safe here, tucked away from the bad air of history, surrounded by the quiet, aromatic ghosts of 1,000 forgotten cures. Now, let the sharp bite of the camphor and the sweetness of the rosewater fade from your mind. The apothecary's shop is dissolving back into the mists of time. You are returning to the neutral, calm environment of your own room, where the air is light, and the only scent is the familiar, comforting smell of your own home. The heavy stone mortar is silent, the glass jars are dark, and the struggle against the miasma is over. Your breathing is deep and effortless. You are drifting away from the spices and the shadows into a vast, cool space of perfect clarity. The world is quiet. The herbs have done their work, and you are falling into a dreamless, peaceful sleep. Breathe in the silence. Breathe out the past. You are resting in the deep, fragrant dark. Beyond the mud of the streets and the dark corners of the apothecary's shop, there existed a world of shimmering contradiction, the medieval castle. To the modern mind, these stone fortresses are the peak of historical romance, places of silk tapestries, flickering candlelight, and noble courtships. But as you drift toward the great grey walls of a 14th century stronghold, the air begins to tell a different story. A castle was not just a home, it was a vertical city, a stone chimney that trapped every scent of its inhabitants and concentrated them into a thick, inescapable atmosphere. It was a palace of perfumed filth, where the highest luxury lived in a constant, rhythmic struggle against the most basic human reality. Imagine entering the great hall as the evening feast begins. The architecture is magnificent, with vaulted ceilings that disappear into a haze of wood smoke. But look down at your feet. The stone floor is not bare. It is covered in a thick, golden layer of rushes, long, dried stems of water plants. This was the medieval version of a carpet, and it served a visceral, hidden purpose. These rushes were meant to absorb the spills of a bustling household. Bits of dropped grease, dregs of spilled ale, the bones of a roasted capon tossed from the table, and even the occasional accidents of the hunting hounds that slept by the fire, all of it was swept into the rushes. Over months, the bottom layers would rot, turning into a damp, fermenting compost that smelled of wet earth and sour beer. To walk across this floor was to feel a soft, unsettling crunch, a rhythmic squelch that released a faint, stale odor with every step. To combat this creeping rot, the nobility employed the art of strewing. Servants would scatter handfuls of dried lavender, crushed mint, and sweet-smelling woodruff over the top of the old rushes. The scent was a desperate floral layer cake. As the heavy silk hems of the ladies' gowns brushed the floor, they released a momentary puff of herbal sweetness, a fleeting ghost of a summer garden that struggled to mask the deep, organic stench of the decomposing layers beneath. This is the essence of the castle. A thin veil of perfume stretched over a mountain of grime. The wealthy did not live in cleanliness. They lived in a more expensive version of the dirt, one that smelled of roses and rotting meat in equal measure. Now, let your mind drift upward, following the spiral stone staircase to the private chambers. Here, the struggle for hygiene took a more architectural turn. Built into the thickness of the outer walls were the garderobes, the medieval toilets. These were small, cold stone cubicles with a simple wooden seat over a hole that dropped directly into the castle moat, or a deep cesspit at the base of the tower. There was no plumbing, no rushing water to carry the waste away. There was only the long, dark drop, and the biting draft of the winter wind blowing back up through the hole. Imagine the sensation of sitting in that cramped stone space in the dead of night. The only sound, the distant, rhythmic dripping of water on stone, and the whistle of the wind. Yet, in a strange twist of medieval logic, these garderobes were also the castle's wardrobes. The nobility hung their finest silk and velvet robes in the small passage leading to the toilet. They believed that the sharp acidic fumes of ammonia rising from the waste below would kill the moths and fleas that lived in the fabric. To wear the clothes of a king was to wear garments that smelled faintly of the sewer, a scent that was considered a mark of status and protection. The heavy, sweet musk of the court was always underscored by this sharp, biting tang of the pit. It was an olfactory landscape where the beautiful and the base were inseparable. As the feast in the great hall dies down and the torches are extinguished one by one, the castle settles into a heavy, humid silence. The scent of the lavender fades, leaving only the damp, cold smell of the stone and the lingering haze of the hearth. The inhabitants retreat to their beds, pulling thick furs over their bodies to ward off the chill. They are surrounded by the smells of their status, the smoke, the spices, the silk, and the waste. It is a world that is sensory, raw, and profoundly honest about the nature of life. Now, let the cold stone walls of the castle dissolve into the warmth and softness of your own sanctuary. You are not walking on rotting rushes. You are resting on clean, dry floors. Your clothes do not hang in a stone chimney of fumes. They are fresh and light. The heavy, cloying perfume of the Middle Ages is being replaced by the neutral, peaceful air of the present. The sound of the wind in the garderobe is gone, replaced by the soft, rhythmic sound of your own breathing. You are drifting away from the towers and the moats into a space of perfect, uncomplicated comfort. The castle is a shadow in the mist, and you are falling into a sleep that is light, airy, and free from the weight of the past. The shadows are long, the air is still, and you are safe in the quiet, clean dark. To understand the medieval world, you must look at the hands of the washerwoman, for they held the secrets of a chemistry that would horrify the modern soul. Imagine standing on the banks of a slow-moving river on a grey, misty morning in the year 1360. The air is bitingly cold, smelling of damp earth and the sulphurous charcoal of the city's chimneys. Before you, a large wooden vat bubbles over a cracking fire, but the steam rising from it does not smell of soap or mountain springs. It carries a sharp, acrid, and undeniably human tang. This is the art of the bucking the rhythmic, exhausting process of medieval laundry, where the most discarded of substances were used to create the purest of whites. In a world without synthetic detergents, the primary cleaning agent was something every household produced in abundance: stale urine. Collected in large ceramic jars over several days, the urine was allowed to ferment until it transformed into a powerful ammonia-rich lye. Imagine the sensation of standing over that vat as the liquid begins to simmer. The smell is thick and biting, a sharp chemical sting that hits the back of your throat and makes your eyes water. To the medieval mind, this was not filth. It was a potent solvent, a liquid fire that could strip away the stubborn oils of sheep's wool and the deep, yellowed stains of human sweat from the precious linen shifts we spoke of before. Watch the rhythmic labor of the laundry. The heavy linen garments are submerged into this pungent brew, and then the bucking begins. Huge wooden paddles, worn smooth by decades of use, are used to stir and beat the fabric. The sound is a wet, heavy, thudder rhythmic heartbeat of the riverside. Each strike of the paddle forces the ammonia through the fibers, breaking down the grime of weeks of wear. The washerwoman's arms are red and chapped from the combination of the biting cold and the caustic liquid, her skin absorbing the sharp scent of the lye until it becomes a permanent part of her identity. This was the price of a white shirt, a labor that was as olfactory as it was physical. But the process did not end with the ammonia. To soften the harshness and to further bleach the fabric, the clothes were then treated with wood ash. Imagine a fine grey powder being sifted over the wet linen ash taken from the heart of the oak and beech fires. When mixed with water, the ash created another form of lye, one that smelled of the forest and the hearth. The clothes were rinsed and beaten again, this time in the cold, rushing water of the river. The sound changes now, from the dull thud of the vat to the sharp, splashing slap of fabric against flat stones. This was the battledore technique, a rhythmic percussion that echoed along the riverbanks of every medieval town, a signal that the city was purging its secrets into the current. Finally, the clothes were spread out on the grass or hung over hawthorn bushes to dry in the sun and the wind. This is the moment of transformation. As the moisture evaporates, the sharp, biting scents of urine and ash vanish into the air. They are replaced by the scent of the open field, the green, ozonic smell of crushed grass, and the faint, sweet aroma of the hawthorn blossoms. The linen becomes stiff and bright, a blinding white that seems impossible given the dark, murky liquids it was born from. To touch this fabric once it is dry is to feel a crisp, structural purity. It is rough, it is honest, and it is entirely free of the bad air that the medieval person so feared. As you lie in your own bed, feel the incredible simplicity of your own laundry. You do not smell the ammonia of the vat or the grit of the wood ash. Your sheets have been cleaned by invisible forces, by machines that hum in the distance, leaving behind only a faint floral ghost of a scent. The rhythmic thud of the washerwoman's paddle is a ghost of the past, a sound that has been silenced by time. You are resting in a world of effortless cleanliness, where the transition from grime to grace requires no sacrifice from your skin or your senses. The river is quiet now, the vats are cold, and the white linen of history is folded away in the dark. Your breath is steady, your heart is slow, and you are drifting into a sleep that is as clean and bright as a shirt dried on a summer hedge. The shadows are soft, the air is still, and you are falling, weightless, into the deep. In the deepest, most shadowed corner of the medieval home, there is a small wooden cradle, carved from heavy oak and polished by the touch of many generations. This is the nursery of the 14th century, a place where the fragility of new life met the harshest realities of a world without sanitation. To understand the grit of history, we must look at the smallest of its inhabitants. A medieval infant did not live in a world of soft, disposable cotton and sterilized surfaces. Theirs was an existence defined by swaddling a rhythmic, tight binding of the body that created a warm, humid, and static environment from the very moment of birth. Imagine the sensation of being wrapped in these long, narrow strips of linen. The midwife's hands are firm as she winds the cloth around the baby's limbs, pinning the arms to the sides and straightening the legs until the infant resembles a small, motionless chrysalis. This was not an act of cruelty, but one of deep, protective care. It was believed that a baby's bones were as soft as wax, and without the rigid support of the swaddle, their limbs would grow crooked or their spirits would wander. For weeks at a time, the child remained in this cocoon, the linen absorbing every drop of moisture and every organic byproduct of a growing body. Now, consider the medieval solution for the most basic of needs, the diaper. There was no elastic, no absorbent gel, and no easy way to change a child in the middle of a freezing winter night. Instead, the layers of swaddling were padded with what the earth provided. In the forests, women gathered soft green sphagnum moss, prized for its natural ability to hold water and its faint, antiseptic scent of pine and damp earth. In the farming villages, they used dried wood shavings or even clean straw, tucked into the folds of the linen to act as a primitive filter. As you lie in your bed, try to imagine the atmosphere of that cradle. It is a dense, concentrated scent, a mixture of sour milk, the earthy musk of damp moss, and the omnipresent wood smoke of the hearth. Because of the fear of the miasma and the danger of opening the pores with water, a medieval baby was rarely, if ever, fully washed. Instead, their skin was rubbed with oils, or perhaps a bit of rose water if the family was wealthy, but more often, the grime was simply allowed to accumulate. It was seen as a protective layer, a second skin of dust and salt that shielded the infant from the chilling drafts that whistled through the timber walls. The sound of the nursery was the rhythmic creak of the cradle on the uneven floorboards, and the low, hushed tones of a lullaby sung in a language long forgotten. The air was heavy and still, trapped within the heavy woolen blankets draped over the cradle to keep out the light and the bad air. Inside that small dark space, the infant lived in a state of sensory immersion. They knew the world through the texture of the linen, the warmth of the fire, and the familiar, unwashed scent of their mother's skin. There was an incredible intimacy in this dirt, a shared biological reality that bound the family together more tightly than any modern hygiene could ever allow. When the swaddling was finally undone, once every few days, it was a moment of profound transition. The air would hit the infant's skin, and the sudden release from the tightness of the cloth would cause a frantic waving of limbs. The smell of the fermented moss and the stale linen would fill the small room, a sharp reminder of the labor of survival. Then, the process would begin again, the fresh moss, the new straw, and the rhythmic tightening wrap of the linen bands, sealing the child back into their warm, protective cage. As you breathe in the cool, neutral air of your own bedroom, feel the incredible freedom of your limbs. You are not bound by linen. You are not padded with moss. Your sheets are light, and your skin is clean, free from the heavy protective crust of the past. The rhythmic creaking of the oak cradle is fading into the distance, turning into the soft, steady hum of the modern night. The scents of the nursery, the sour milk, the smoke, and the earth are drifting away like mist in the morning sun. You are safe in a world of softness and space, where every breath is clear and every movement is your own. The nursery of grime is a ghost, and you are falling into a sleep that is light, airy, and infinitely deep. The blankets are soft, the world is quiet, and you are drifting down into the perfect clean silence of the dark. As the candle flickers and dies in the draughty corner of a medieval bedchamber, a new and invisible world awakens within the very fabric of the room. You are no longer standing in the muddy street or the humid bathhouse. You are lying upon a mattress that is a living, breathing ecosystem. In the 14th century, the bed was not merely a place of rest. It was a crowded theater of biological coexistence. To understand the grit of the past, you must feel the texture of the bedding beneath you. It is not the smooth, high-thread count cotton of your modern life. It is a heavy striped ticking stuffed with the history of the field's dried straw, pea hulls, or if you are fortunate, the coarse, oily feathers of a plucked goose. Imagine the sound of settling into such a bed. Every movement you make is met with a sharp, dry crackle, a rhythmic rustle of straw shifting beneath your weight. The smell is a dense, concentrated aroma of a summer harvest, long since past, now turned dusty and slightly sweet with the scent of dried clover and hay. But beneath that sweetness lies a sharper, muskier note. This is the scent of the unseen guests who shared every medieval night. Because heat was a luxury, and laundry was a labor of weeks, the bedding was rarely stripped and never truly cleaned. It was a warm, dark sanctuary for a hidden population of hitchhikers that defined the sensory reality of the night. Feel the phantom sensation of a tiny, rhythmic tickle against your ankle, then your wrist. These are the bedbugs, the wall lice as they were sometimes called, who lived in the crevices of the wooden bed frame and the hollow stalks of the straw. They waited for the hearth to cool and the breathing of the household to slow into the deep, steady cadence of sleep. To the medieval person, the bite of a bedbug or the crawl of a louse was not a scandal. It was a mundane, daily tax paid for the warmth of the blankets. They would reach out in their sleep, a reflexive and rhythmic scratching of the skin that became as natural as breathing. Their skin was a map of these nocturnal encounters, a landscape of small, red welts that they accepted with a weary, stoic indifference. The blankets themselves were heavy, woven from thick, unwashed wool that still carried the lanolin grease of the sheep. In the damp cold of a European winter, these blankets absorbed the moisture from the air and the breath of the sleepers until they felt slightly tacky to the touch. They smelled of wet wool and wood smoke, a heavy, comforting scent that acted as a sensory anchor in it. The pitch-black room, to be under these covers, was to be submerged in the collective center of the family. In the great hall, or the peasant's hut, people rarely slept alone. They huddled together, parents, children, and travelers sharing their body heat in a tight, organic knot of humanity. The air beneath the blankets was a hot, recycled atmosphere of sweat, yeast, and the earthy musk of bodies that had labored since dawn. Consider the ritual of the flea trap. In more affluent houses, a small, perforated ivory or silver cylinder would be placed under the pillow or hung around the neck. Inside, A piece of fur soaked in blood and resin was intended to lure the fleas away from the human host. It was a tiny, fragrant, mechanical prayer against the itching. The scent of the resin would waft up in the darkness, a faint medicinal ghost haunting the heavy, sour air of the bed. This was the medieval night, a constant, quiet battle between the desire for rest and the persistence of the parasites. As you lie in your own bed now, feel the incredible, sterile silence of your surroundings. Your mattress is solid and silent, containing no straw to rustle and no hidden life to stir. Your sheets are cool and dry, smelling of nothing but the fresh air or the faint, clean scent of a modern detergent. The rhythmic scratching of the past has been silenced. The heavy, greasy wool has been replaced by weightless fibers that do not trap the sense of the day. You are the sole occupant of your space, a luxury that a medieval king could scarcely imagine. The crackle of the straw is fading away, replaced by the soft, rhythmic hum of your own quiet room. The scent of the damp wool and the fermented hay is drifting out into the night, dissolving into the cool, neutral darkness. You are safe. You are clean. You are alone in the best possible way. The unseen guests of history have retreated into the shadows of the past, leaving you in a sanctuary of perfect, undisturbed peace. Your breath is slow, your skin is calm, and you are falling into a deep, heavy sleep that belongs to you and you alone. The bed is still, the air is clear, and the night is yours. In the medieval imagination, the body was not a solid object, but a fluid vessel, constantly reacting to the invisible tides of the environment. When the protective layers of linen, the crust of the unwashed skin, and the fragrant shields of the apothecary failed, the person was left exposed to the raw, visceral reality of infection. To understand the grit of the 14th century, you must look at how they treated a wound in a world where the very concept of a germ did not exist. Imagine you are lying in a small, stone-walled infirmary attached to a monastery. The air is cool and damp, smelling of old incense, wet limestone, and the sharp, metallic tang of fresh blood. Outside, the rain is turning the monastery gardens into a thick, black slurry of mud and decaying leaves, a reminder of the bad air that supposedly brought rot to the flesh. The treatment of a deep cut or a broken limb was a rhythmic, sensory process that relied on the earth's most basic materials. There were no sterile bandages or clear liquids in glass vials. Instead, the physician, or the monk, would reach for what was known as a plaster. Imagine the sensation of a warm, heavy poultice being pressed against your skin. It is made of a mixture of boiled bread, crushed leeks, and the rendered fat of a pig. The smell is thick and culinary, a savory aroma that feels strangely out of place in a room of suffering. As the warmth of the plaster seeps into your muscles, it creates a humid, pulsing sensation intended to draw out the poisons that the miasma had deposited in your blood. But the most iconic and terrifying tool of medieval medicine was the leech. Imagine a small glazed ceramic jar being brought to your bedside. Inside, in the murky, stagnant water, dozens of dark, rhythmic bodies are undulating. The physician reaches in with steady fingers and places a single, cold, and slippery creature against your temple or your arm. The shock of the cold, wet contact is sudden, a sharp contrast to the feverish heat of your skin. Then, you feel the tiny, rhythmic pulse of the leech as it begins to feed. To the medieval mind, this was a sacred act of balancing the humors. They believed that the leech had the wisdom to suck away only the corrupt blood, leaving the pure life force behind. You lie there in the silence, listening to the distant dripping of the rain, feeling the slow, heavy weight of the leech as it grows, a living parasite turned into a medicinal savior. When the wound was more severe, the physician turned to the fire. Imagine the sound of a branding iron being heated. In the hearth, a low, rhythmic roar of the bellows followed by the white-hot hiss of the metal. This was cauterization, the ultimate seal against the invisible demons of the air. The smell was a horrific, unforgettable cloud of scorched hair and burning flesh, a scent so potent it would linger in the fabric of your clothes for days. This was the smell of survival. To seal a wound with fire was to create a permanent, blackened barrier that no miasma could penetrate. It was a violent, primitive surgery that left the patient in a state of profound shock, their world narrowing down to the rhythmic throb of the burn and the smell of the smoke. Even the bandages were a part of this organic cycle. They were made of old linen, often washed in the same urine and ash lye we spoke of before, and reused until they fell apart. They were not white. They were a stained yellowish gray, smelling of the laundry and the faint, sweet scent of the honey used to coat them. Honey was the medieval secret weapon, a thick, golden, and sticky substance that never rotted. When applied to a wound, it created a seal that was both an antibiotic and a barrier. Imagine the sensation of that cool, heavy sweetness being spread over a raw cut, the honey slowly crystallizing in the air, trapping the scent of summer bees within the grime of the infirmary. As you lie in your own bed, feel the incredible safety of your own body. You are not a vessel of humus to be drained. You are not a wound to be cauterized. Your skin is intact. Your blood is your own, and the only medicine you need is the deep, quiet rhythm of your own breath. The slippery touch of the leech and the stinging heat of the iron are nothing but echoes in the dark, shadows of a time when survival was a brutal sensory battle. The smell of the honey and the leeks is fading, replaced by the neutral, calm atmosphere of your modern sanctuary. The physician has packed away his jars, the fire in the hearth is out, and the infirmary is silent. You are drifting away from the pain and the struggle into a vast, cool space where your body is light and your mind is at peace. The grit of the past is gone, leaving only the soft, steady heartbeat of the night. You are safe. You are resting. You are falling into the deep. The evolution of human scent is a journey through a thickening fog of organic reality that the modern nose can scarcely comprehend. To stand in a crowded medieval market in the year 1390 was to experience a sensory assault so dense it possessed a physical weight. In our world, we live in an olfactory vacuum, a sterilized environment where every natural odor is scrubbed away, neutralized by chemicals, or masked by the synthetic ghosts of ocean breeze and mountain air. But as you drift back into the medieval consciousness, you must recalibrate your senses. You must understand that to the person of the Middle Ages, a world without smell was a world without life. Scent was the primary language of existence, a constant, rhythmic broadcast of status, health, and spiritual standing. Imagine walking through a narrow city lane at midday. The air is not a single scent, but a swirling, chaotic tapestry of competing aromas. There is the sharp, ammonia-rich tang of the dyer's vats, the cloying, fatty sweetness of the tallow chandler, boiling animal grease for candles, and the heavy, metallic smell of the blacksmith's forge. Beneath it all is the permanent, foundational scent of the street itself. A mixture of mud, horse manure, and the sour fermentation of household waste. But here is the secret of the medieval mind. They did not find this repulsive in the way you do. To them, this was simply the smell of industry. A town that did not smell was a town that was dead, a place where no one was eating, working, or producing. The stench was a sign of vitality, a rhythmic pulse of a community that was stubbornly, vibrantly alive. Because they lived in this permanent cloud of organic decay, the medieval nose developed a profound sensitivity to pure scents. This is why the use of incense in a cathedral was so transformative. Imagine stepping from the heavy, humid filth of the market into the cool stone silence of a great church. The air suddenly changes. It is filled with the ethereal, crystalline smoke of frankincense and myrrh. To the medieval worshipper, This was not just a pleasant aroma, it was a physical manifestation of the breath of God. The contrast was so sharp, so violent, that the scent alone could induce a state of religious ecstasy. The sweet odor of sanctity was a literal concept. They believed that the bodies of saints did not rot, but instead released the scent of lilies and roses, a divine victory over the universal stench of the fallen world. This obsession with scent led to a peculiar form of olfactory armor. The wealthy didn't just want to smell good, they wanted to create a private atmosphere that traveled with them. Imagine a noblewoman walking through a plague-stricken district. She carries a pomander, a perforated gold bowl filled with a chaplet of ambergris, musk, and dried civet. As she moves, she creates a small, invisible bubble of fragrance, a rhythmic puff of perfume with every step that keeps the bad air at bay. Her world was a constant battle between the high, piercing notes of her perfume and the deep, bass thud of the street's filth. It was a sensory hierarchy where the quality of the air you breathed was the ultimate indicator of your place in the world. As the centuries passed, our noses began to retreat. We started to pave our streets, to hide our waste in underground pipes, and to banish the animals from our living spaces. We traded the raw, honest complexity of the medieval world for a sanitized silence. In doing so, we lost a certain intimacy with the earth. The medieval person knew the smell of every season, every craft, and every stage of human decay. Their world was loud, tactile, and aromatic in a way that made every breath an encounter with reality. They did not fear the smell of the body. They feared only the corrupt air that brought death. Now, as you lie in your quiet, scentless room, feel the incredible stillness of your own air. There is no wood smoke, no tanning leather, and no rotting rushes. Your breathing is light and effortless, untroubled by the heavy, humid sense of the past. The rhythmic assault of the medieval market is fading, turning into a distant, ghostly memory. The incense of the cathedral has drifted out through the high stone windows, and the pomander has been closed. You are returning to a space of perfect, neutral clarity, where the only scent is the faint, comforting smell of your own rest. The world is clean, the air is thin and cool, and you are falling into a sleep that is as silent and pure as the void between the stars. The heavy odors of history have been washed away, leaving you in a sanctuary of absolute fragrant peace. Your heart is slow, your mind is clear, and you are drifting down into the deep, sweet dark. As you descend further into the heavy velvet silence of the 14th century, you must confront the ultimate phantom of the medieval mind, the miasma. This was not merely an idea, it was a physical presence, an invisible crawling fog that lived in the damp hollows of the earth and the stagnant corners of the city. To the person of 1348, the Black Death was not a bacterial infection carried by fleas, it was a corruption of the very air they breathed. Imagine standing at a window as the sun begins to set, watching a thick, yellowish mist roll off the river. It moves with a slow, rhythmic deliberation, creeping over the cobblestones and coiling around the wooden beams of the houses. This was the breath of the plague, a bad air that carried the scent of wet earth, rotting vegetation, and something sharper, the metallic, stinging aroma of fear. The reaction to this invisible enemy was a frantic, sensory, desperate prayer. To survive the miasma, one had to change the very chemistry of the environment. Imagine the interior of a wealthy merchant's house during the height of the great mortality. Every window is shuttered tight, and every crack in the door is stuffed with rags soaked in vinegar. The room is hot, claustrophobic, and thick with the rhythmic smoke of a plague fire. This was no ordinary hearth. It was fed with aromatic woods, juniper, laurel, and cedar, whose smoke was believed to be heavy enough to push the pestilential air back out into the street. The sound is the constant, low crackle of the resinous wood, and the smell is an overwhelming, stinging cloud of incense that bites at the eyes and fills the lungs until every breath feels like swallowing a solid weight. Now, consider the figure of the plague doctor, a creature born from the depths of this atmospheric nightmare. Though the iconic bird beak mask is often associated with a later era, the philosophy behind it was already taking root. The mask was a portable laboratory, its long beak stuffed with a teriyaki complex mixture of more than 60 ingredients, including crushed dried vipers, honey, cinnamon, and powdered rose petals. Imagine the sensation of breathing through that beak. Every inhalation is filtered through a dense, spicy wall of fragrance. The air is dry, hot, and smells of 1,000 dead summers. To the doctor, this was his only shield. He moved through the silent, corpse-strewn streets, wrapped in a heavy leather cloak coated in wax, a rhythmic swish-swish of stiff fabric being the only sound in the suffocating stillness. He believed that if he could just keep his own internal atmosphere pure, the external rot could not touch him. But for the common person, the defense was more visceral. They turned to the sharpest, most aggressive scents they could find. They carried sponges soaked in 4 thieves' vinegar, a concoction of wormwood, sage, rosemary, and garlic. Imagine the stinging, acidic scent of that sponge pressed against your face as you walk past a house marked with a red cross. It is a violent, protective odor that clears the sinuses and numbs the tongue. They believed that the sheer strength of the vinegar could kill the miasma on contact. The world became a battlefield of smells, the deep bass note of the rotting city versus the high screaming treble of the vinegar and the herbs. There was a profound psychological weight to this constant olfactory vigilance. To breathe was to risk everything. Every stray scent, every unexpected whiff of decay from a gutter was a potential death sentence. People lived in a state of rhythmic paranoia, constantly sniffing the air, searching for the first hint of the sweet smell that was said to precede the plague. They retreated into their homes, huddling around their aromatic fires, creating a shared, smoky sanctuary where the only sound was the crackle of the juniper and the low, whispered prayers for a clean wind to blow from the mountains. As you lie in your own room, feel the incredible, transparent purity of your air. There is no plague fog outside your window. There is no stinging smoke in your lungs. You do not need a sponge of vinegar or a mask of spices to move through the world. Your breathing is a natural, effortless rhythm, a flow of clear, neutral oxygen that brings only life. The heavy yellow mist of the 14th century is evaporating into the light of history. The plague fires have burned down to cold gray ash, and the bird-masked doctors have vanished into the shadows. You are resting in a world where the air is your friend, a soft and silent companion that cradles you as you sleep. The smell of the juniper is gone, the sting of the vinegar has faded, and you are drifting into a vast open space of absolute clarity. The miasma is a ghost, and you are the master of a clean, quiet dark. Your heart is steady, your breath is a whisper, and you are falling softly and deeply into the peace of the present. Now, we reach the final shore of our long rhythmic journey through the shadowed corridors of the medieval senses. This is the sanctuary of the present, the moment where the heavy, iron-scented air of the 14th century finally thins and dissolves into the cool, transparent clarity of your own bedroom. Imagine the sensation of a great, heavy tapestry being pulled back from a stone window. The thick, musk-filled atmosphere of the castle, the stinging smoke of the plague fires, and the damp, earthy scent of the rush-covered floors are all swept away by a single clean gust of the modern night. You are standing at the threshold of two worlds, looking back one last time at the flickering torches of history before you step into the absolute silent purity of your own time. In the world you have just left, cleanliness was a labor of hours and a gamble with the soul. But here in the sanctuary of your bed, hygiene has become a silent, invisible grace. Feel the incredible lightness of your own skin. There is no protective crust of salt, no layer of wood ash, and no heavy lanolin grease from unwashed wool. Your body is a vessel of effortless purity, maintained by the turn of a silver tap and the soft floral whisper of soaps that would have seemed like celestial alchemy to a medieval queen. The bad air that haunted the dreams of your ancestors has been banished, replaced by a climate that is filtered, neutral, and perfectly still. You are living in the future that they could only imagine in their most fevered prayers, a world of light, space, and a cleanliness so profound it feels like silence. Consider the texture of your sheets once more. They are not the stiff, abrasive linen of the bucking tub. They are a soft, weightless embrace that does not trap the heat or the history of the day. As you settle into the mattress, there is no dry crackle of straw or the shifting weight of pea hulls. There is only a deep, yielding support that contours to your body, a rhythmic sinking into a void of comfort. The unseen guests of the medieval bedding have vanished into the dust of centuries. You are the sole inhabitant of this peaceful territory, a sovereign of your own rest. The only sound in this sanctuary is the steady, slow tide of your own breathing, a rhythm that is no longer measured by the tolling of cathedral bells or the crackle of a hearth, but by the calm internal pulse of a mind at ease. The transformation is complete. The heavy, visceral reality of the Middle Ages has been distilled into a story, a fading echo that adds a layer of richness to your own quiet night. You have walked through the mud and the steam, the spices and the steel, and you have emerged into a place of perfect, uncomplicated safety. The grit of the past has served its purpose. It has reminded you of the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the exquisite luxury of your own modern peace. The shadows of the garderobe and the apothecary's jars are retreating into the mist, leaving you in a room that is as clean and clear as a mirror. As the final light of the medieval world flickers out, feel a sense of profound, heavy gratitude. You are the heir to 1,000 years of survival. But you are also the master of your own tranquility. The darkness outside your window is not a hiding place for miasma, but a vast, cool ocean of stars. The air you breathe is a gift of clarity, a silent companion that lulls you deeper and deeper into the velvet folds of the night. Your heart is slow, your limbs are weightless, and your mind is a still, dark pool, reflecting nothing but the peace of the present. The journey is over. The stories have been told. The ancestors have retreated to their timber-framed houses and stone towers, leaving you to the sanctuary of your sleep. Every muscle in your body has surrendered to the gravity of the bed. Every thought has been washed clean by the silence. You are falling now, drifting down through the layers of time into a sleep that is deep, restorative, and entirely your own. The world is quiet, the air is pure, and the night is a vast, open embrace. Good night, traveler. The history of the unwashed has been laid to rest, and the cleanliness of the soul is your only reality. Sleep now, in the perfect, scentless dark. May your dreams be as light as linen, and as vast as the starlit sky. The fire is out, the day is done, and you are safe in the deep, quiet peace of the present. Good night, and sleep well. Sweet dreams.